for those who were really poo-pooed about how sort of that Mordaka got nerfed and, maybe lost its appeal or its zeal, keep in mind that a lot of the stuff that was, the core, the fundamental, the foundation of what was known as Mordaka already existed as Dread Mob. So if you're really hell-bent on playing those things, you play them here, or you can play a different style of that because, like we talked about before, they still have access to that. They still have access to other strengths in Mordaka in itself as a detachment. So here, the focus of the detachments in this trance are typically like mech infantry or mech supported infantry, walker support, which actually includes killicans, which is actually great for this detachment. If you're a killican liker, lover, whatever it may be, Dread Mob is your best detachment for killicans, and it's your best detachment for Stampa, and I'll explain why as we go on. Now, that being said, the Gretchen themselves are also very, very valuable in this detachment, which I'll go into as well as we go on. Other valuable units that we've seen are still Flash Gits, still Ludas, and then some sort of combat threat. You don't always need that, just depending on the kind of skew or stat check you want to do. There are, as we talk about that, how you could just bring mass volume of bodies and wounds in this detachment. But there are also times where you just need something like a counter punch for any good melee army as an orc player. Where you need to take advantage of your, as any good gun line as an orc player is, you need something to punch you off, punch enemies off you, and a reason for enemy to respect your wall. And in Dreadmount, that's why you'd kind of bring some sort of combat threat, but not always, depending on how much you're really pushing that stat line. Now, I put combined arms and then kind of accidental. I should have erased that. And this timing of this army's WAAAGH or its tempo, a lot of the time is actually more of a defensive thing because of the mass amount of grots you're likely to have on the list, how you're going to use Zod, and then how you're going to actually expose your gun line means Dread Mob can end up acting as a defensive WAAAGH sometimes, or it's really just because you're really trying to take up space in gun lines after you've shot what you want to shoot. Now you want to charge, pick up that little screen so that you can kind of make up the distance to start moving again because you do lack assault. And sometimes you're just going to run out of transports and have just a lot of stuff on the field. So the wall timing can act more as a defensive thing because for the most part, if you're running the most successful version of Dread Mob, you're going to have just a redundancy stat line of Ludas, Tank Busters, Flash Gits, and then mass lines of Grot OC. Shout out to our sponsors, the Baron of Dice, as they helped us do our wall tactic dice. So shout them out. Check them out in the description, 5% off in the discount because nobody likes taxes. And shout out to Baron of Dice. They allow us to do our paint competition. So thank you very much to them. So when we're talking about the strengths of this list, Battleline Grots is the strengths of this list. And then Reactive 12-inch Zod is another one of the core strengths of this list. Now, there are really cool stratagems on this list alongside that reactive move because keep in mind when it says your typical movement for the Gretchen unit. So typically it'd be 6, but because Zod's movement is his 12 inches on the WAAAGH, means if once you declare that WAAAGH, if Zod's not in combat anymore, then you can just end up reactive moving 12. So it just gets really atrocious for the enemy if they misplay that or if you can maximize that as an orc player. Of course, when you have Overwatch, you are overwatching with the button. So in this case, you can choose sustain, lethal, and that makes it so you can actually have more options for Overwatch, unlike other detachments that are, still efficient for DACA and the Orc Codex. This one allows you to have a little bit more options in that because different units will just simply choose the button. Worst case scenario. Now, the button can be perceived as a weakness and to some orc players more than others, but it is something you have to account for when you're kind of killing yourself. Now, the damage stacking potential of this detachment is freaking awesome. I have so much fun with it. First, like we spoke about when we alluded to earlier as the walker support, is the cans, right? Something like a 6-man unit of killicans is going to take you a boatload of CP. It's going to take you 3 CP on your WAAAGH to, possibly rapid ingress, advance and shoot, maybe bigger shells for bigger gits, maybe clanking and claws so that you can end up getting 4 damage, strength 11 punches on your killicans, but nothing else in the Orc Codex is going to give you the amount of punches of damage 4 of the killicans do. And only until recently was that the only option other than Breaker Boys that now are the option, right? They were the only option back in the day for something so ridiculous like that. So that also goes for your Stampa, the ability to throttle damage on that. So you can pick one really problematic enemy unit and just nail it down a lot of the time. But you can have an issue with being threat overloaded with toughness, right? Saturation. Something I would say is like Nurgle Demons, I've had an issue with before with this attachment, but that was before Tank Busters existed. They could help offset that, but then you are kind of under the I hope I get enough 6s here. So that's why having a lot of grots and reactive 12 inches moves are really important to this list. Now, I would say the exclusivity, because you end up paying for a lot of characters, which is the character count could be an issue. If you're adding all the tank busters and you're adding all the solo baby mechs, if you're adding baby mechs though for that potential, you could still be taking advantage of your walkers, right? So if you decide I want to add Morkanaut, Gorkanaut, I only have one or two tank busters, well, I have to pay for the mech because I want to give them a mech. Or you pay the mech and you just put them with the Ludas and you pay for the shock attack gun with the tank busters, typically actually, then the Ludas are going to be in a better position to maybe jump out and then poke the Gorkanaut, Morkanaut, give him +1 to hit, and then the mech presses the button for the Ludas and they do stuff. And then, so there's other things you can actually get off to help make it not so much a weakness, but it is something you account for where you're like, dang, I got like 7 characters on this list. And then the clock, because if you're bringing a lot of grots, if you're bringing a lot of these units that get a bunch of DACA, and then a lot of them are big units of 10 orc infantry models, so maybe a bunch of unit of 5-man flash gets, or 10 Ludas, 10 tank busters, or 6, sorry, max tank busters, and then a bunch of grots, 22-man size grot units. Ooh, that just really wears on you and your clock as an orc player with your decision making, with your stratagem calling. So I do say that you should keep that in mind, and that is what someone would consider a weakness or a valid reason not to play the detachment, because the whole point of this is to encourage you or to tell you the strength, pros, and cons of this. So with that being said, be on the lookout for more Dread Mob videos and videos on that. I was gonna say I had keys to victory. Keys to victory for this one is understanding the weakness of how soft your units are outside of the wall. Now that means your wall timing being a defensive measure is more important. So the wall timing as a defensive measure is one of those keys to victory, and then also not being hemmed or held back in your own deployment zone. So you sometimes still end up playing for commandos. A lot of the time you're just paying for a lot of grots, and then whatever they throw in your face, you're docking them out of the way and then running up the field with more grots, or you're reactive moving as they close the distance on you, so grots are still moving forward. So there are ways to kind of offset it, but it does take a cunning get with a lot of time to understand the Dread Mob. Be a cunning get and check out our new order markers that are in our store. So shout out to you gets being cunning. Help you guys get all the orders set on the table nice and clean for all you gets to get stuck in. If you enjoyed the clip, check out the full video here. If you'd like to see more tactics, click here.
Let's get stuck in, lads!